Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at something really important for firms, FCA notifications.
Well, yeah, it's a big one.
It is a big one, and it can be kind of confusing sometimes. So we, here at Compliance Consultant, wanted to help clear up some of the mystery around this for you guys.
Yeah, we've got some excerpts actually straight from the source, the FCA Handbook, chapters 13 and 15.
Oh, wow. Okay, so
They lay out the ground rules.
straight to the source material.
Yeah.
Like it. So maybe before we get into the nitty-gritty, can we zoom out a little bit and talk about why these notifications are important in the first place?
You know, the FCA is kind of like a watchful guardian, right? They want to make sure that the financial system is healthy and everyone's playing by the rules.
Right.
So notifications are their way of kind of keeping a finger on the pulse, making sure that firms are being transparent and acting in everybody's best interests.
So it's more than just like checking a box.
Oh, absolutely. It's about fostering a culture of openness and cooperation.
I see.
And Principle 11 of the FCA's Principles for Businesses really underlines that. You know, firms need to disclose anything the FCA would reasonably expect to know.
Okay, so I'm sure some firms get a little bit nervous thinking like, okay, what exactly does the FCA need to know?
That's the question, isn't it? And it's a good one.
Right.
You see, this goes beyond just regulated activities.
So,
We're also talking about unregulated activities and even the actions of other companies that are within a firm's group. So
wow, so it's a pretty wide net.
it's a wide net. It's a lot to keep track of.
Yeah, for sure. So let's say things go a bit sideways, and there is a potential issue. When should a firm hit that panic button and notify the FCA?
That's when we have to think about this concept of serious regulatory impact.
Okay.
Essentially, anything that could have, serious consequences for the firm, its customers, or even the wider financial system that needs to be on the FCA's radar immediately.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do firms know, if something meets that serious threshold? Because it seems a bit subjective.
Yeah, it's definitely not always black and white.
Right.
And that's why the FCA handbook gives us some trigger points to consider.
Yep.
For example, imagine a doctor losing their medical license.
Okay. Yeah.
That calls into question their ability to, practice, right?
Yeah, right.
So for firms, this could be something like failing to meet their threshold conditions for authorization or, having a serious financial issue. This would be a big red flag for the FCA.
Yeah, so like not meeting their financial requirements or something.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What are some other red flags that firms should be looking out for?
Well, reputational damage is a big one.
Okay,
Think about a firm that's caught up in a major scandal.
right.
All that negative press, it can really erode public trust and, potentially impact the firm's stability.
Hmm.
So the FCA needs to know about situations like that could, kind of snowball.
Right, because it could impact the whole industry, really.
Absolutely. It could shake confidence in the whole sector.
Yeah, okay. Another critical trigger, I imagine, would be a firm's ability to serve its customers.
You got it.
Like imagine a massive systems crash
Oh, yeah.
that prevents clients from accessing their accounts or making transactions.
Huge disruption, major notification.
Yeah, that would be a big deal.
Definitely.
Especially since the FCA is, really focused on protecting consumers.
You're absolutely right. Anything that threatens, people's access to financial services is going to be a major concern for them.
Yeah, and of course, anything that could have serious financial consequences for the UK financial system or for other firms that needs to be reported ASAP as well.
Right. We're talking about things that could, trigger a domino effect, potentially lead to a wider crisis.
So it's about firms needing to sort of look at the bigger picture as well and understand how, a problem at their firm could potentially ripple outwards.
Yeah. And, when in doubt, firms should always err on the side of caution.
Right.
It's better to over-communicate with the FCA.
Right.
Early communication can prevent a molehill from becoming a mountain.
For sure. I think it sounds like having a good relationship with the FCA and an open dialogue is really key.
It's essential. And that's where Principle 11 really comes in.
Right.
It's not just about reacting to problems. It's about being proactive, keeping the FCA in the loop about important matters, even if they don't fall neatly under a specific rule.
Okay, so what are some examples of situations where a firm should be proactively reaching out to the FCA?
Well, let's say a firm is planning a major restructuring, like a merger or an acquisition. The FCA is going to want to understand the potential implications of that for the firm and its customers.
Right, or maybe a firm is like venturing into new territory, expanding overseas, or launching some brand new innovative product.
Definitely. The FCA would want to be aware of those developments.
Yeah, okay. And even something like outsourcing, entrusting critical functions to a third party.
Yeah, that could raise potential risk that the FCA needs to assess.
So it sounds like the FCA really wants a 360-degree view of what's happening within firms.
Hmm.
They're not just like sitting back and waiting for things to go wrong.
Absolutely. They're taking a proactive approach to supervision, encouraging firms to be open and communicate early, even before making firm commitments.
Okay.
And that allows for dialogue, and it can help ensure that potential risks are identified and addressed proactively.
Okay, so we've talked about situations where things go wrong. We've talked about situations where firms are making big changes. But what about when a firm actually breaks the rules? What happens then?
That's when we get into the territory of breaches and offenses.
Uh-oh.
The FCA handbook is very clear firms need to immediately report any breaches of rules, regulations, or offenses under the Financial Services and Markets Act or the Consumer Credit Act.
Okay.
And remember, this doesn't just apply to the firm itself, it also applies to, its directors, officers, employees, anyone acting on its behalf.
So it's a pretty wide net.
It is. It's a big net.
Okay, so I'm curious about, what kinds of things would fall under that umbrella of breaches?
So we're talking about a wide range of potential issues here.
Yeah.
It could be a breach of FCA rules, including the principles for businesses or the conduct of business sourcebook rules.
Yeah.
It could involve breaches of requirements imposed by the Consumer Credit Act, the Financial Services and Markets Act, or a whole host of other regulations like MEFR, MiFID, CRR, you name it.
Wow, that's a lot to keep track of.
It is a lot.
So if somebody within a firm, commits an offense, even if it's not the firm itself, the firm is still obligated to report it.
Absolutely. The FCA wants to know about any instances where individuals working within regulated firms have broken the rules.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether the firm was directly involved or not.
Okay, so let's say a firm identifies a potential breach.
Yeah.
Are there any guidelines for determining how serious it is and whether it warrants reporting to the FCA?
Definitely. The FCA handbook provides a really helpful framework for assessing the significance of a breach.
Okay.
They want firms to consider, factors like the potential financial losses involved, how frequently the breach occurred, whether it points to weaknesses in the firm's systems and controls, and how quickly the firm, identified and addressed the problem.
So it's not just a matter of checking a box. It's about demonstrating that the firm understands the context and the potential impact of the breach, and that they're taking action to fix it.
You got it. The FCA wants to see that firms are taking their responsibilities seriously. And remember, some matters might need to be reported under multiple rules.
Oh, okay.
So even if a firm has already reported something under one rule, they still need to make separate notifications if required under other rules because each notification serves a different purpose and requires different information.
Okay, wow, we've covered a lot of ground already, but I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, we're just getting started?
There are even more situations that can trigger reporting obligations for firms.
We've got a whole bunch more red flags to talk about.
Okay, well, I'm starting to understand why navigating this world of FCA notifications can feel like wandering through a maze.
It's definitely a complex area. It's a lot for firms to manage.
Yeah, and that's where compliance consultant comes in.
Absolutely.
Here at Compliance Consultant, we help firms just like yours break down these complex regulations into manageable pieces, providing clear and practical guidance to ensure that you're meeting your obligations and avoiding those potential pitfalls.
That's what we do.
And I'm sure our listeners appreciate having experts like you to turn to.
We're always happy to help. So stay tuned as we dive deeper into the specifics of these other notification triggers.
Oh, let's do it.
All right. Let's talk about something that's a really hot topic these days, fraud.
Okay.
It's a constant threat for firms, and the FCA is really keeping a close eye on this one.
So let's say a firm suspects that an employee might be, up to no good.
Right.
What kind of actions would trigger an immediate report to the FCA?
Well, if a firm suspects that an employee is committing fraud against a customer, that needs to be reported right away. Same goes for fraud against the firm itself, even if it's not an employee doing it. And it doesn't even have to be a confirmed case of fraud. If there's reasonable suspicion that someone is acting with intent to commit fraud, the FCA needs to be brought in.
So it's about preventing potential harm as much as reacting to, actual incidents.
Exactly. Early intervention is key.
Okay.
It's also super important for firms to be on the lookout for any irregularities in their records.
Like what kind of irregularity?
Oh, anything from accounting discrepancies to missing documents, anything that raises red flags about potential misconduct or fraudulent activity.
Okay, so that could be a sign that something's not quite right.
Right.
What about situations where an employee might not be engaging in outright fraud, but they're still behaving badly?
That's when we get into the realm of serious misconduct.
Oh.
Anytime an employee's actions call into question their honesty or integrity, the FCA wants to know.
So, like, what kind of things are we talking about here?
We're talking about conflicts of interest, unauthorized trading breaches of confidentiality, things like that.
So pretty serious stuff.
Yeah,
Okay, so we've talked about fraud. We've talked about misconduct. What are some other potential red flags that firms need to be aware of?
Well, insolvency is a big one. If a firm is facing bankruptcy, winding up, or similar proceedings, the FCA needs to be notified immediately.
Okay, and why is that?
So they can take steps to protect consumers and ensure that the firm's activities are wound down in an orderly manner.
Right, so they're not caught off guard by a firm suddenly collapsing.
Exactly.
Okay.
And remember, when it comes to these sensitive issues like fraud and insolvency, the FCA wants firms to provide context,
Okay.
explain the potential impact. It's not just about reporting the incident, it's about demonstrating that the firm understands the implications and is taking the right steps to address the underlying issues.
So, for example, if a firm suspects an employee of fraud,
Yeah.
they should not only report the incident, but also explain what steps they're taking to investigate the matter, recover any losses and strengthen their internal controls to prevent it from happening again.
You got it. They want to see that firms are taking a proactive and responsible approach to managing these challenges.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it,
Mm.
but I have to admit my head is spinning a little bit.
It's a lot to take in.
There's just so much to keep track of.
That's why we're here.
Right.
Here at Compliance Consultant, we work with firms every single day to help them understand and navigate these complex reporting requirements.
That's good to know because I'm realizing that simply knowing the rules isn't enough.
Not at all.
You need someone who can help you apply them in real-world situations.
Absolutely. And don't forget, the FCA handbook is full of specific examples that can really help bring these rules to life.
Okay, let's dive into some of those examples.
Let's do it.
I'm curious to see how these notification requirements play out in practice.
Great idea. Let's start with a scenario that might seem a little unexpected. Imagine a firm that's managing assets for an occupational pension scheme.
Okay.
They receive a request or an instruction from a trustee that raises some concerns. It might seem at odds with the trustee's duties to the pension scheme members.
So it's not necessarily a clear-cut case of fraud or misconduct,
Right.
but something just feels off.
Exactly. And the FCA wants firms to be vigilant in these situations. If something doesn't feel right, it's better to err on the side of caution and notify them.
So they're acting as a safeguard in a way, protecting pension savers from potential conflicts of interest or breaches of duty.
You got it. Now let's switch gears and look at an example from the insurance world.
Okay.
Imagine an insurer that's dealing with a delinquent intermediary who owes them a significant amount of commission.
Okay.
It could happen if a policy is sold, but the premium was never paid by the customer.
Oh, right.
In these cases, the insurer might have already paid the intermediary their commission, expecting to recoup it once the premium's collected.
Ah, I see. So the insurer is out of pocket, and the intermediary isn't holding up their end of the bargain.
Exactly. And if that commission remains unpaid for an extended period, the FCA wants to know about it.
Okay, well,
It's about ensuring fair dealing and preventing financial harm within that insurance distribution chain.
okay, that makes sense. Now let's talk about something that sounds a bit more high-stakes market abuse.
Ah, yes. The FCA takes this very seriously. They rely on firms to be their eyes and ears, monitoring trading activity for any signs of suspicious behavior.
So what kind of activities would raise red flags for potential market manipulation?
It could be anything from unusual trading patterns that suggest insider trading to attempts to spread false rumors to influence a stock's price.
So if a firm spots something fishy, they need to report it to the FCA right away.
Exactly. The FCA needs that information to investigate potential cases of market abuse and take action to protect the integrity of the markets.
Okay, now let's switch gears again and talk about something that's really important for retail investors: complaints against financial advisors.
This is a crucial area for consumer protection.
Right.
The FCA has specific rules in place to track complaints and identify any potential problems.
So how does this work in practice?
Yeah.
What kind of complaint triggers a notification to the FCA?
Well, if a financial advisor has 3 upheld complaints against them in a single year, that's a red flag for the FCA.
Yeah.
It suggests a pattern of behavior that needs to be looked into.
It's like a 3 strikes and you're out rule.
You could say that the FCA also pays close attention to the amount of redress paid out on complaints.
Okay.
If an advisor's total redress payments exceed £50,000 in a year, that also triggers a notification.
So it's not just the number of complaints, it's also the financial impact they're having on
You
consumers.
got it. The FCA wants to ensure that advisors are acting in their clients' best interests and not causing them financial harm.
This has been so helpful, but I feel like we've only just scratched the
You're
surface.
not wrong. There's a lot more to explore.
There is.
But the good news is you don't have to navigate this alone.
That's right. Our friends at Compliance Consultant are here to help. They can provide expert guidance on all aspects of FCA regulation, including notifications. You can visit their website at https://complianceconsultant.org, email info@complianceconsultant.org, or call 0800-689-0190 in the UK.
And don't forget about their silver anniversary offer.
Oh, that's
A
gone.
massive 25% discount for 2025.
It's a fantastic opportunity to get some expert compliance support at a great price.
It is.
Now let's keep going. There are even more specific scenarios and notification triggers we need to cover. All right, so we've explored a whole bunch of situations that trigger those FCA notifications, everything from fraud and misconduct to complaints and market abuse. But I have a feeling there's even more.
You'd be right. The FCA handbook, it's like this treasure trove of specific rules tailored to different types of firms and activities.
So many rules.
So many.
Okay, so let's dive into a few more examples.
Okay, great. Let's imagine you're a retail intermediary,
Right.
a firm that helps consumers access financial products and services. Now, some of these firms might be classified as enhanced scope SMCR firms because of their size and the nature of their business.
Enhanced scope SMCR, what does that mean?
So this is all about the Senior Managers and Certification Regime, or SMCR for short.
Okay.
It's designed to improve conduct and accountability within firms.
Right.
And these enhanced scope SMCR firms, they face more stringent regulatory requirements because they have a greater potential impact on the financial system.
So how does a retail intermediary know if they fall into that enhanced scope category?
It all comes down to the numbers.
Okay.
The FCA handbook gives them specific guidelines for calculating their revenue from regulated activities.
Okay.
And if it exceeds a certain threshold, they might qualify as an enhanced scope SMCR firm.
So it's not just a one-time check.
Yeah.
They need to keep an eye on their revenue and let the FCA know if they cross that line.
Exactly. It's about making sure the right regulatory framework is in place.
Okay, now what about firms that operate internationally? Do they have any special notification requirements?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's talk about MUFID investment firms. These are firms providing investment services across borders. And then there's MiFID optional exemption firms, slightly different status. These firms need to keep the FCA informed about any changes to their management body.
So things like new appointments, departures, changes in responsibilities, anything that impacts who's calling the shots at the firm.
You got it. And these notifications need to be made promptly, either before the change takes effect or, if that's not possible, within 10 business days after the change.
So transparency is key. The FCA wants to know who's steering the ship at these firms.
Absolutely. Now let's switch gears again and talk about benchmark firms.
Okay.
These are the guys responsible for setting those all-important financial benchmarks like interest rates and exchange rates.
Oh, yeah, those benchmarks are crucial for so many financial transactions.
Absolutely. Now, some benchmark firms, those known as limited scope SMCR benchmark firms, have been granted a special waiver by the FCA.
Okay, a waiver. What's that all about?
Well, it means they have a slightly lighter touch when it comes to the senior managers and certification regime.
So less stringent requirements?
Exactly. But there's a catch. This waiver is often conditional on their income from benchmark activities staying below a certain percentage of their total income.
Ah, so they need to keep track of their revenue and make sure they don't cross that line.
That's right. And if they do exceed that threshold, they need to notify the FCA. It's about ensuring they're still eligible for that special treatment.
Wow, this is complex stuff.
Yeah,
We've
yeah.
really gone deep down the rabbit hole today.
We have. It's amazing how many different scenarios and specialized rules there are when it comes to FCA notifications.
It's a lot to keep track of.
It is, but there's a reason for all these rules.
Right.
They're all about making sure that the financial system is sound, transparent, and fair.
And thankfully, we don't have to go it alone. Our friends at Compliance Consultant are the experts at navigating this complex landscape.
Absolutely.
They can provide tailored guidance to help firms understand their obligations and avoid any costly missteps.
That's what we do best.
So if you're feeling lost or overwhelmed, Compliance Consultant is here to help. You can visit their website at https://complianceconsultant.org, email info@complianceconsultant.org, or call 0800-689-0190 in the UK. And don't forget about their silver anniversary. Offer a massive 25% discount for 2025.
It's a fantastic opportunity to get that expert compliance support at a great price.
Well, I think we've earned a break after all that.
Yeah.
We've covered so much ground today, But it's clear that FCA notifications are a vital part of a well-functioning financial system.
Couldn't agree more.
It's all about transparency, accountability, and ultimately protecting consumers and the integrity of those markets.
That's it in a nutshell.
And remember, the landscape is constantly evolving, so it's crucial to stay informed and seek expert guidance when you need it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Now, as you go about your day, think about this. How do you think technology is changing the game when it comes to detecting and reporting those potential issues to the FCA? It's a question worth pondering. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.